Okay, I have a couple questions before we begin this next thing. It says, knowing what you know now, could you actually solve this? Well, no, because I don't have an isolated variable. Okay, I don't know how. Okay, now this we can solve because we have an isolated variable. Right, the other side, make sure all variables in the other equation are covered. So we got 1x plus 2y equals 1. And then we're going to replace our variable in the box. Now extend that, because now we need to put 2x plus negative 7. Don't just put minus 7, it screws everything up. Okay, and now I can solve for x, so I'll be parenthesizing. So it's going to be 4x plus negative 14. And then we do have our plus 1x right there. And then over here you have 1. Okay, so my x's are on the same side, so we just add them. It's 5x plus negative 14. Then plus 14, plus 14. And then that's 15. Okay, and then I can divide by 5 on both sides, and we get 3. Okay, now I can put 3 in here, and I take 2 times 3, that's 6, and then take away 7 from 6, it's negative 1. Okay, now you need to use our next thing, because now you're not going to have isolated variables. In this little packet with step instructions, we're going to learn a part of the elimination method. It's kind of a 2-day thing. Today goes pretty quickly, the problems do. So you have to use elimination. You need to put a letter E here that stands for elimination, because when you look at the equals, you don't have that isolated variable. Okay, you don't. So here's what you do. Here's how you do elimination. You kind of make this squiggly line here. Underline it, kind of. Now what you do is you check for a common absolute value in front of either x or y. Okay? If you don't have one, and that's tomorrow, okay? You will have one today. So we'll forget with this boom, 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 boom. We'll forget that. That's not a part of today's lesson. That's tomorrow. Okay, so I put 1s in front of my x's and then a 1 in front of that y. When we're using the elimination method, all our variables have to be covered. Now look in front of the x's. What's the absolute value of 1? It's 1. What's the absolute value of negative 1? That means how far from the number line is. It's 1 as well. So right here I have a common absolute value. So there's where my common absolute value is at. Okay, so we have it. Now make sure your common absolute value contains 1 positive and 1 negative. So look at those 1s. One of them's positive, one of them's negative. That's good. And if not, you're going to need to do something, but we had that. Add the equations and solve for the first variable. So you add. What's 1 plus negative 1? It's 0. I'll prove it to you. Okay, so if I got 0, I'm just going to kind of slash these out. Okay. Now, what's 2 plus positive 2 plus positive 1? Positive 3y. And what's positive 13 plus positive 5? Why, 18. Now I can divide by 3, and I have solved for y. So we have y solved for. Okay, put your solution into the very first equation and solve for the second variable. So it's y that's equal to 6. So let's get this y out of here and put a 6 in, okay? So that equation, well, we're equal to 13. And then I've got 1x. And 2 times 6 is 12. Well, now it's pretty easy to solve for it. Again, I have 1x plus 2 times 6, which is 12, equals 13. So minus 12, and 1x equals 1, and I don't need to divide. The answer is 1 and 6. Okay, my next one, x equals y equals. Again, we do not have an isolated variable, so we need to use our elimination method. So I check for a common absolute value in front of x or y. So 9 and negative 4, and then 1 and negative 1. Remember, if it's a minus, that's a negative. That's going to be a negative. So what's the absolute value of 9? It's 9. What's the absolute value of negative 4? Well, that's 4. There's no common absolute value. So what's the absolute value of 1? Well, it's 1. What's the absolute value of negative 1? Well, that's also 1. So right here is where we have our common absolute value. Okay, now make sure your common absolute value contains one positive and one negative. It does. That's a positive, that's a negative, so we're good to go. Now you add the equations together and solve for the first variable. So I'm going to be adding 9 to negative 4. So 9 plus negative 4, that's 5x. And now I'm going to be adding 1 and negative 1. Always add. That's 0, so we can just slash that out and not put anything. And then equals, and then I add positive 2 and negative 17 together. And that's negative 15. So I divide by 5, and x is going to equal negative 3. So that's my x I just found. Now put your solution into the very first equation and solve for your second variable. So put that into the first equation. And now I can solve. So that equation is equal to 2. I have 9 times negative 3. That's negative 27. And then 1y. So I plus 27, plus 27, and 1y equals 29. So 29. Okay, next problem. Check for a common absolute value in front of either x or y. Okay, so I have negative 3. And again, you're using elimination. Anytime you don't have an isolated variable, this is the go-to strategy. So I've got negative 3x, positive 7x, and then negative 1y, positive 1y. Okay, so the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. The absolute value of 7 is 7. So I don't have a common absolute value out of the x's. The absolute value of negative 1 is 1. The absolute value of positive 1 is 1. So right here is where my common absolute value is at with the y's. Now what I need to do is make sure that we have one of them negative and one of them positive. That's what I want. I do. Okay, so now we go to town on this. So I add negative 3 and positive 7 since those are both x's. That's 4, so 4x. Then I add negative 1 and positive 1. Well, that's 0, so we can cancel those. Then 8 plus negative 12 is negative 4. Now it's just a matter of dividing. So x, and that's going to be negative 1. Now go up here, replace your x with negative 1. Okay, so we need to find a product there. So negative 3, so it's equal to 8. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. And then we're going to go plus negative 1y. And now we can solve for y. So I box up negative 1y. So I minus 3, minus 3. So negative 1y equals 5. And then I divide both sides by negative 1. And that's negative 5. Okay, next problem. Solving for x and solving for y. So I check for a common absolute value. So we got 3 and negative 3, negative 1 and 7. The absolute value of 3 is 3. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3. So it's my x's that have the common absolute value. So is one of them positive and one of them negative? You bet. That's good. Now we're ready to add, because I know that one of them is going to drop out. Negative, because whenever we add opposites like this, I get 0. Okay, then we take -1 plus 7. I don't like to really do the plus negative here because it clutters up the problem. So it's going to be 6y. And then I add positive 30 and positive 6. That's 36. Okay, so we get y, and that's going to be 6. Okay, so y is equal to 6. Okay, now go up here. Replace that with 6. That's what you're going to be multiplying. So we're equal to 30. We have 3x. -1 times 6 is -6. Plus 6, plus 6. So 3 times x equals 36. And then I divide by 3. And 36 divided by 3 is 12. Okay, next up, solving for x, solving for y. Common absolute value, okay? Absolute value -9 is 9. Absolute value positive 9 is 9. So here's my common absolute value. Now we got to make sure that one of them's negative and one of them's positive. Okay, it is negative, positive. So now I'm ready to add these together. Okay, so I'm adding -9 and positive 9. That's 0. So those can go away. I add positive 4 and -6. That's -2y. And then I add a -17 and positive 3, and that's -14. And I divide by -2, and that gives me a y value of 7. So y has been solved for. Okay, now I'm going to get the y out. We're going to put 7 in there for that. Now circle that then. So the equation's equal to -17. So I have to find this product, 4 and 7, and that's 4 times 7 is 28. And I also have the -9x. So I need to clear out the 28 by subtracting. And that's -17 minus 28. It's going to be -45. And then we divide by -9. That gives me an answer of 5. Okay, so 5 and 7. Okay, absolute value of -3 is 3. The absolute value of -4 is 4, so I don't have a common absolute value there. The absolute value of -5 is 5. The absolute value of positive 5 is 5, so here's my common absolute value. Okay, do I have a negative and a positive? Yes, I do, so I'm ready to add. Okay, so we want to drop the equals, so we add -3 and -4, it's -7x. I need to add -5 and positive 5, but I'm pretty sure that's 0, pretty sure where the y's dropped out. And then I add -7 and positive 14, and that's 7. Okay, now all we need to do is divide, and x is -1. Okay, now plug your -1 in for the x, and then circle what you're going to be multiplying. So we're equal to -7. I need to find the product of -3 and -1, that's 3. And then I have -5y. So I get rid of the 3 by minusing it. And then -5y. And then we divide by -5, and y equals 2. Okay, next one. So, again, you don't have an isolated variable. That's why you have to use elimination. Check for your common apps. Okay, so the absolute value of 5 is 5. Absolute value of -5 is 5. So right here is the common absolute value. Now you got to make sure you have a positive and a negative, which we do. So now I'm ready to add. So 5 and negative 5, it's 0, but let me just show you how it needs to be done. 0. And then negative 1 and positive 4, that adds to 3y. And then I take positive 8 and add negative 17. That's negative 9. So that ends up equaling negative 3. So y is negative 3. Okay, so we get the y out of there and put negative 3. Now you want to circle that so you know the two numbers to multiply. Negative 3 times negative 1 is 3. And then I'm adding 5x. So now I can solve for x. I'll be minusing 3 from both sides. And that's 5. And then dividing by 5. And that is 1. Okay. Okay, now an interesting situation arises here. So I hope you haven't shut off the video yet. X equals y equals. Got to use the big E. What's the absolute value of 3? That's 3. What's the absolute value of 1? That's 1. So that's not a common absolute value. What's the absolute value of negative 4? 4. What's the absolute value of negative 4? Well, that's also 4. So here's my common absolute value, but one needs to be positive, one needs to be negative. And right now that's not the case. They're both negative. So what you need to do is a little trick. It's called multiplying just the bottom by negative 1. So what's 1x times negative 1? All it does is switch the sign. Negative 4 times negative 1 would switch that to plus 4. And negative 40 times negative 1 would switch that to positive 40. Now they have opposite signs. Now I'm ready to actually add. So I add positive 3 and negative 1. That's 2x. And then I add negative 4 and positive 4, and that's 0, just like I want. See, the problem was if I would have kept them both negative 4s, when I add those together, that's negative 8. I need it to be 0. And then negative 16 plus 40 gives me 24. So I will divide by 2. That's 12. So x is 12. So get the x out and put 12 and then circle that. You'll be finding that product. So 3 times 12 is 36. And then adding negative 4y. Remember, a minus means it's going to be a negative. So I minus 36, minus 36. Negative 16 minus 36 is negative 52. And then we go divide. That's 13. Okay. Okay, next one, solving for x, solving for y. Here's my common absolute value. Those would both have an absolute value of 1. And I have a positive and a negative, so that's good. I'm ready to add. Because I know 1 plus negative 1 is 0. 2 plus 3 is 5y. 2 plus 3 is 15. Okay, so y is equal to 3. Okay, now get your y out and put 3. So 2 times 3 is 6, plus the 1x. So I have 1x, and then 2 minus 6 is negative 4. Don't even need to divide. Okay, x equals y equals. Last problem. Here is where my common absolute value is at, but you're not ready to add because they're both positives. You have to have one positive and one negative. Right now I don't have that. So I will be multiplying the bottom by negative 1, just the bottom. I want the top to stay the same. So 5 times negative 1 is negative 5. Positive 2 times negative 1 is negative 2, so that's going to be a negative 2 now. Negative 49 times negative 1 is positive 49, and now we're set. Because 3 plus negative 5 is negative 2, so negative 2x. And then 2 plus negative 2, because remember that's now a negative 2, is 0. Then I add negative 31 and positive 49, and that's 18. And x is negative 9. So I have negative 9 there. Okay, so my equation is equal to negative 31. I find a product, 3 and negative 9. 3 times negative 9 is negative 27 plus 2y. So I plus 27 plus 27. Negative 31 plus 27 is negative 4. So that gives me negative 2. Okay, that's what I have to say today on that today. I hope it's been informative, and we'll hit the rest tomorrow.